Every Valentine's Day, I notice the same thing happening across the nonprofit sector. Inbox after inbox fills up with messages that say some version of, "We love our donors." There's a heart graphic, maybe a warm subject line, sometimes a social post to match. And I don't doubt the intention behind any of it. But if I'm being honest, a lot of those messages feel easy to ignore. They blur together. They don't quite land the way the sender hopes that they will, which raises an uncomfortable question we don't talk about very often. If we really love our donors, why does our gratitude sometimes feel generic? And that's where the tension shows up. Because on one hand, fundraisers are overwhelmed, we're understaffed, and we're stretched so thin. On the other hand, there's this unspoken belief that if gratitude truly mattered to us, we would slow down, write every word ourselves, and make it perfect. We see this tension all the time in romantic comedies. Someone is deeply in love, but the execution keeps missing the mark. Wrong gestures, bad timing, awkward delivery. And yet, the love itself is never in question. And lately, I've been thinking about how much that mirrors donor stewardship, especially when we talk about artificial intelligence. Because the real question isn't whether a message was handcrafted, it's whether the donor felt seen. So today, I want to talk about donor love, intention, execution, and how we show up with care in a very real, very stretched reality. So, let's talk fundraising. Valentine's Day is interesting because it's one of the few moments each year where we collectively pause and ask, did this feel meaningful? Not impressive and not expensive, but meaningful. And that question shows up in fundraising in a really similar way. When a donor receives a message from your organization, they're not grading it for literary excellence. They're not wondering how many drafts it took. They're asking something much simpler. Did this feel like it was meant for me? And that's why those Valentine's emails with the heart graphic often fall flat. Not because they're wrong, but because they're so broad. They're easy to send, easy to receive, and easy to forget, too. They say, "We love our donors," but they don't always say, "We see you." And that's an important distinction. Because love, whether it's in relationships or it's in fundraising, isn't proven through effort alone. It's proven through attention. In the romantic comedies, this is usually the turning point. The big realization isn't, "I need to do more." It's, "I need to pay attention differently." The character stops making grand gestures and starts listening. They remember the small things. They show up in ways that actually match the other person. And that's the shift I want us to think about when it comes to donor gratitude. Instead of asking, "Was this impressive?" or even, "Was this beautifully written?" the more honest question is, does this reflect what I know about this donor and why they care? This is where the conversation about AI gets complicated for a lot of people, because there's a belief floating around our sector that authenticity only exists if every word came directly from you in your own voice with no assistance. And if you needed help, maybe it wasn't authentic enough. It's not a true reflection of who you are. But that belief confuses intention with execution. Think about moments where people struggle to find the right words. Wedding vows, a eulogy for someone they deeply love. These are moments where the feeling is very real and nobody is questioning that. But the language can be incredibly hard, especially if we're not professional writers, or we're not as eloquent as we wish we were, or the emotion itself is bigger than the words we can find. When someone uses AI to help shape those words, it doesn't mean they don't mean them. It often means they're trying to get closer to the truth of what they actually feel, not farther away from it. The same is true with donors. Your intention is the part that makes gratitude real. The execution is simply how that intention shows up in the world. And when fundraisers are overwhelmed, when we're understaffed, or when we're stretched thin, execution is often where things break down. And it's not because we don't care, but because we care deeply and we don't always have the tools or the support that we need. And this is where I want to gently reframe the conversation. Because authenticity isn't about whether AI was involved. Authenticity is about whether the message reflects genuine care, attention, and respect. Donors don't experience our process. They experience the end result. They experience how they're treated. And when we keep that at the center, Valentine's Day stops being about hearts and graphics, and it starts being about something much more grounded, showing donors that they matter in ways that they can actually feel. And there's another layer underneath this conversation that I think we need to name gently because it's where a lot of unnecessary guilt lives. And it's the confusion between care and craft. Care is the value that we hold. Craft is the skill that we have, acquire, or maybe don't have at all. They're related, but they are not the same thing. In fundraising, we often collapse the two. We assume that if someone truly cares about donors, they must also be excellent writers, confident with language, comfortable with shaping tone, able to sit down and produce something warm and polished on demand. But that assumption only really holds in one kind of environment. If you work in a large organization where your role is focused entirely on copywriting for the fundraising team, then yes, being a great copywriter is part of the job. That skill set matters, and it should be developed. But that is not the reality for most fundraisers. Many of us come from small shops. Some of us are solo shops. We're expected to be okay at everything and strong at a few things if we're not expected to be great at everything. Relationship building, strategy, listening, holding complexity, managing up, managing out, all of the administrative tasks. And that doesn't mean that we're going to be great at everything, and it doesn't mean that we should be. Some of the most donor-centered fundraisers I know are not people who love writing. They're listeners. They're present. They remember details. They build trust over time. Their care is unquestionable. Their challenge is that they don't have the same skill set as a professional copywriter. And when we pretend that only people with strong writing skills get to show gratitude the right way, we unintentionally tell a lot of really great fundraisers that they're falling short. Not because they don't care, but because they don't have the same skill set. And this is where AI starts to get misunderstood, because using support for craft is not the same thing as outsourcing care or our values. When someone uses AI to help draft a donor message, they're not saying, I don't care enough to do this myself. Oftentimes what they're actually saying is, I care enough to want the recipient to receive this with the same intention I'm holding on sending it. And that distinction matters. Think about wedding vows for a moment. Some people can stand up and speak beautifully off the cuff. Others know exactly how they feel but struggle to find the right words. The emotion is very real, but the language can be hard to access, especially when the feeling itself is bigger than any single sentence. When someone uses AI to help shape their vows, it doesn't make the moment less sincere. It helps them express something that already exists. The care was present long before the words were finalized, and the same is true for donor gratitude. AI doesn't create the appreciation, it helps translate it. And for fundraisers who are juggling too many responsibilities, that support can be the difference between a message that never gets sent and one that actually reaches the donor. So here's the part that I want to say clearly. We should not require fundraisers to be experts at everything in order for their work to be considered authentic. We should not equate the mechanics of execution with the sincerity of our care. And we should be careful about holding up standards that only work for people whose primary strength happens to be writing. Care shows up in intention. Craft is how that intention gets carried. AI can support craft without touching care at all. And when we understand that, a lot of the tension around this conversation starts to ease. Because the goal was never perfect prose. The goal was always this, that the donor feels noticed, that the gratitude feels timely, that the message reflects real respect. When AI helps us do that more consistently and in ways that align with our actual strengths, that's not a loss of authenticity. That's care finding a way through. So let's bring this out of theory and into something concrete. Because if this conversation stays philosophical, it's easy to agree with it and still walk away unsure how to actually act on it. So picture a very real moment. A gift comes in. It's not a headline-making gift, just a solid, meaningful contribution from someone who cares about your mission. You want to acknowledge it really well. So you open up a blank document or you stare at the reply window in your database, and the intention is there immediately. You have gratitude, you have respect, an awareness of why this donor gave. And then the familiar stall happens. What do I say? How long should this be? How do I make this sound warm without sounding generic? And if you're someone who loves writing, maybe this part flows easily for you. But if writing isn't your strongest skill or you're moving between 10 different responsibilities, this is often where things start to slow down. And this is where AI can be a support and not a substitute. Used well, it doesn't decide what you feel. It doesn't invent appreciation. It simply helps you shape what's already there. Here's what that might look like. Instead of starting from a blank page, you give AI a little context. You might say something like, help me draft a warm, donor-centered thank you note. The donor supported our after-school program because they care about educational access. Keep it around 100 words, make it sincere, specific, and conversational. Notice what's happening here. You're setting the intention. You're naming the reason for the gift. You're defining the tone. AI is helping with structure and flow, but not the meaning. What comes back is a draft. It's not a finished product, but it's a starting place. And this is where your role matters most. Because you read it, you adjust it, you add a detail that only you're going to know. You remove anything that doesn't sound like you, because authenticity isn't about where the draft started. It's about where the final message reflects your voice and your values. And something interesting happens here. The donor doesn't receive the draft, they receive the feeling. They experience whether the message feels timely, whether it reflects why they gave, whether it sounds like it came from someone who was paying attention to them. That's true in fundraising, and it's true in our personal lives too. When someone gives us flowers for Valentine's Day, we don't hold the expectation that they grew them themselves. And when someone gives us a box of chocolates, we don't tell them that if they really cared, they would have made the chocolates themselves by hand, let alone grown the sugar and the cacao and milked the cows. What matters is that the gift fits the moment, that it reflects care, that it says, I was thinking about you. Donors experience gratitude the same way. They don't evaluate your process. They feel whether the message recognizes them and their values. And when AI helps you do that more consistently, especially when your capacity is limited, it's not diluting the relationship, it's actually protecting it. So this is what ethical, human-centered use of AI actually looks like. It's quiet, it's intentional, and it keeps the fundraiser exactly where they belong, at the center of the relationship. Whenever we talk about AI and donor communication, there's one concern that comes up again and again, and it's trust. Not just donor trust, but our own. Fundraisers worry about crossing a line, about using a tool in a way that feels uncomfortable or unclear, about doing something that might look efficient on the surface, but quietly erodes the relationship underneath. Those concerns are valid, and they deserve to be named, not brushed aside. Because donor trust has always been the foundation of this work. Using AI doesn't remove your responsibility as a steward. It actually makes your responsibility more intentional. Because AI doesn't know what you mean unless you tell it. To get something that sounds like you, reflects your values, and aligns with the relationship that you're trying to honor, you have to guide it. You have to name what matters. You have to give direction. If you offer a wide open prompt, they'll get something wide open back, something that doesn't feel like you. And that mismatch is often a signal that the intention hasn't been clarified yet. That's different from writing on autopilot. When we're rushing, it's easy to fall back on familiar phrases or default language without really stopping to ask, is this what I actually want to say? Intention can get buried under momentum. So, using AI well asks you to pause, to articulate what you're trying to communicate, to be clear about tone and purpose and meaning. The act of guidance is not passive. It's thoughtful. It's deliberate. And it keeps you firmly in your role as the steward of the relationship. You're not handing responsibility over, but you're exercising it with support. And this is also where boundaries matter, because healthy use of AI in fundraising starts with a few simple non-negotiable practices. You don't paste in sensitive donor information. You use placeholders instead of names or amounts. You treat AI as a drafting partner, not a decision maker. In other words, you stay present. If your intention is to acknowledge a donor promptly, thoughtfully, and with respect, then using a tool to help you do that more consistently aligns with stewardship, not against it. Stewardship has never meant doing everything by hand. It has always meant caring for relationships responsibly. Thinking about the systems that we already trust. We have templates, we use databases, we have automated receipts. We don't question their ethics because we understand their role. They handle structure so that humans can focus on meaning. AI, used well, fits into that same category. It supports the work without replacing the relationship. And here's something else that often gets missed. Donors don't lose trust because you used a tool. They lose trust when communication is inconsistent, late, or impersonal. When gratitude feels rushed or absent. When follow-up doesn't happen. When care becomes sporadic. If AI helps you show up more reliably, more thoughtfully, and with greater consistency, that actually strengthens trust over time. This is where stewardship and sustainability quietly meet. Not environmental sustainability, but relational sustainability. The kind that allows you to keep showing up with care week after week, year after year. Systems that support steadiness protect the relationships. And that's what this really comes down to. Because AI isn't here to replace your judgment or your values. It's here to support them. It gives structure to intention. It creates space for attention. And it helps ensure that donors feel the care that you already hold, even if your capacity is limited. That's not a shortcut. That's stewardship practiced with intention. So as we start to wrap this up, I want to zoom out just a little, because this conversation about donor love and AI isn't really just about thank you notes or Valentine's Day messages. It's about something bigger. It's about what happens after intention. Most fundraisers I know have good intentions. They care deeply about their donors. They want to do this work well. Where things tend to fall apart isn't in the wanting, it's in the follow-through. Ideas feel inspiring in the moment, but then Monday shows up. The inbox fills back up. The urgent crowds out the important. And even the best insights quietly start to slip away. This is something I see not just in daily work, but in how we approach learning. We go to webinars. We listen to podcasts just like this one. We attend conferences. We leave feeling energized and thoughtful, and then we return to the same systems, the same pressures, the same lack of structure that made things hard in the first place. And without a plan, intention stays intention. And that's why I've been thinking a lot about how we support ourselves in turning care into practice. Because donor love doesn't live in ideas. It lives in habits, in small, repeatable choices that make it easier to show up well. That's also why conferences matter, especially when they're designed to help you start strong. This year at AFP Icon, I'll be co-presenting a session with my good friend Carissa Kineski in the very first education block on Sunday morning. The session is called From Inspiration to Implementation, turning conference insights into action. Longtime listeners might remember Carissa from her episode on quiet power in introverted fundraising. She brings a perspective that is deeply thoughtful, practical, and grounded in real experience. This session is designed for two kinds of people specifically. If you've never attended a conference before and you want to know how to get the most out of it without feeling overwhelmed, this session is absolutely for you. And if you've attended conferences before, come home inspired, and then struggled to actually implement what you learned, this is maybe even more for you too. It's about building a plan before the ideas start flying, about choosing what matters most, about setting yourself up to follow through. In a lot of ways, it's the same conversation we've been having today. Intention matters, but intention needs structure if it's going to last. Whether we're talking about donor gratitude, learning new tools, or showing up for our work with care, the goal is the same: to build systems that help our best intentions reach the people they're meant for. So as you head into this week, here's what I'll leave you with. You don't need to do everything by hand to be authentic. You don't need to be great at everything to show care. You just need structures that help your intention show up consistently. Because donors don't feel loved by how hard something was for you. They feel loved when they feel seen. And when you build your work around that truth, everything else starts to line up. Thank you, my friends. I look forward to seeing you again next week. Take care.